everyone, and welcome to the Always On Point podcast with Kristen Ambos. I am so excited. I've wanted to do this podcast for quite some time because I think it is one that the consumers are really going to dive into, and I really think this one's going to be a hit. So today I have Jake Schultz with Spectrum Insurance Personal Lines here. And yes, you heard that right. We're going to talk all things insurance and what is going on in the insurance world. It's about as sexy right now as mortgages are. So he and I have that in common. But I do think it's so important to understand and to get it straight from a professional, an expert in that field that can answer questions for us about what's going on, just to give us all some info. So without further ado, Jake, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Kristen.
Good.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're doing, how long you've been in the biz.
Yeah. So again, my name's Jake with Spectrum Insurance. I have been in the industry about 10 years now. With Spectrum for 7 here in Green Bay. Kind of still work in various different offices throughout the Fox Valley here. And obviously we do insurance in all sorts of states. Aside from that, I guess grew up in kind of a family with a financial background. Numbers were always important to me and something I paid attention to, but didn't want to go the finance route. Following in family's footsteps and chose to go insurance. I thought it was very important, seeing the fact that I had a mishap when I was 16 years old driving my parents' vehicle with some friends in there. So learned quickly what insurance is about and how important it is. Had a very good college professor that came out of Century Insurance right there in Stevens Point where I was attending college. And she, kind of took that a little bit further and really piqued my interest to hop into the insurance world. Obviously, you can go the company side with the actual companies, or you can go the agency route. I decided to go the agency route right out of college and kind of just rolled with it, stuck with it with relationships that I've had and grown on since then, and brings me here with no thinking about companies, just staying on the side of the agencies.
Doing your thing.
Correct.
I love it. So if you don't mind, let's dive right in.
All right.
And, we haven't talked in the detail of this, so I'm super excited to hear, what you have to say. And obviously in the mortgage, I deal with insurance on every single mortgage that I write. And we deal with all kinds of different companies, right? Because the clients choose their insurance. So one of the things that I started seeing was the cost of insurance going up, which I don't think is a surprise to anyone. They felt it. We've all felt everything going up in the last handful of years. Insurance is no different. So can you give us a little bit of background, because everybody's got a different reason why they think insurance is going up. But I wanted you to come right from the, right from the agency and say, okay, this is really kind of what's going on to drive these rates up and that kind of thing. So fill us in.
Where do we start? There's no surprise. Insurance rates have gone up, whether it's home, auto, condo, renters, toys, you name it. Specifically for this conversation, home. Big thing, that's no surprise out there is the, inflation. It all kind of took us by surprise when COVID came, and you went to Menards or whatever, and you saw what the cost of a 2x4 was. And tripled, quadrupled, whatever you want, whatever it was.
All of those things.
And nobody really knew how to react to it insurance wise until total losses started happening, fires, claims, stuff like that. And the cost to rebuild a home was double, maybe more. I mean, between your framing, your lumber, your OSB, your drywall, I mean, all those things just absolutely skyrocketed. People weren't working. The materials were harder to come by, and obviously, much more expensive. And then on top of it, nobody really knew what was going on, if they were or weren't employed, and the wages and everything went up. So just to rebuild a home has went up extraordinarily. An extreme amount. I'm sure you guys obviously see that just on the real estate side, where your $250,000 ranch home is now $425,000 or something like that.
Hear about it every day, see it every day. So you're not lying.
So and then I guess the inflation drove it up. And then, 2021, 2022, 2023, you look at the storms and everything that we had here in the state, and, Wisconsin, Illinois, Iowa, Minnesota. I mean, everybody talks about the East Coast and their hurricanes and their storms, but nobody thinks about the tornadoes, the straight line winds, the hail, the derechos.
I was going to say the hail damage that our area had. And when I say our area, I mean like 30 to 45, 50 mile radius.
Yeah. Yep.
In Wisconsin a couple years ago.
Yep.
And then, of course, all the new roofs that had to be put on. And I mean, it did an incredible number to our homes and our insurance claims.
Yes, it did. So yeah, I mean, why are home rates going up, or why are, building and values going up? Obviously, home rates are going up because to rebuild a home is so much more expensive. Everybody will say a different number, everybody you talk to. But when you talk to a builder or a contractor or anything, you hear just your standard ranch home, or, something that's builder's grade, maybe semi above it. I mean, we're hearing, 200 to 300 a square foot. I mean, usually we're hearing 225, 250 is kind of a common number to rebuild a home.
I was just talking to a builder this week that was like, for a basic home, maybe get you some granite countertops and choosing your flooring. Yep. But $275 a square foot is like the minimum. Yep. So you are right on the money there, Jake.
Yep. It depends kind of what you want, how your house was.
Right.
And people, a lot of people don't realize that, or they think, oh, well, I only bought this house for $250, or I couldn't sell it for that, or whatever. I mean, but insurance, home insurance, what we're looking at is, when somebody asks us for a quote, we gather up all the criteria about your house. How big is it? What's the above ground finishes? What's finished below ground? How big's your garage? What type of flooring, walls, framing, stuff like that do you have? Yeah. And we come up with that value of, it would cost X to rebuild that house. That's including the labor, that's including the debris removal if you ever had a total loss. So, it's different than just your tax assessment, where it's just your house sitting there. There's no labor involved in that value or anything like that. So, we get a lot of pushback all the time of, oh, well, I couldn't sell my house for $450,000. Right. But that's to rebuild it. So there's a lot of, those factors, like I said, the labor, the materials, the debris removal, the cleanup, all that stuff to get your house back to where you were today. And what happened in the insurance industry is they started realizing how much more expensive the home values were as the companies were starting to experience total losses. And we're like, okay, we had this house insured on replacement costs, which is what everybody has, for $225,000. But then all of a sudden, to rebuild that house in a total loss, it was like $310,000.
Yes.
So insurance companies, were on the hook for paying those policies out to rebuild these homes.
Yep. Still need a place to go.
Right. But what happened is all the policies that were out there at the time were just underinsured because of the drastic change that we had impact us.
It didn't catch up, essentially, is what I feel like I'm hearing.
Yeah. I mean, it was, it happened so quickly, and, nobody knew what the whole pandemic was going to bring to us.
Yes.
And, do we take rate and adjustment now? And if so, how steep do we do it?
Right.
Well, everybody in that moment was panicking because people weren't working. People were being laid off, whatever. So the insurance companies kind of sat still, and people even got money back because they weren't driving. Like, they sent out refund checks to people who weren't driving or whatever. Like, everybody, sent out a percentage or whatever.
Yep. I used to get those refund checks without claims and things like that. Yeah.
Yep. And then, so this one for COVID, I don't know who started it or whatever, if it was State Farm or something, but they would send back, just 5% of your auto. And that wasn't for not having claims. It was just because they weren't driving. It was the COVID relief, thing. So then every company had to do it because one did it. So everybody was mad.
Oh, yeah.
And the next thing that, happened was all of a sudden, okay, companies gave all this money back. Great, fine. People were happy, but then, the losses were still happening. And then, looking forward, people started driving again, and the prices of automobiles were ridiculously high.
Yep.
Coming out of it, same thing with housing. So then insurance companies realized, okay, we need to take some sort of step. And on everybody's home insurance policy, you have what's called an inflation guard. And usually that inflation guard was set at about 4 to 6%. So no matter what your home is insured for, usually every year you have your renewal, it would increase about 4% in value, just because they know that things obviously increase. You're doing betterments, improvements, windows, doors, flooring, whatever, and, nothing big dramatic renovation wise. So they always factor that in there. Well, with what was happening, we couldn't go back and just all of a sudden change everybody's policies to have to increase by 40, 50, 80,000, depending on how uninsured people were. So what the companies did was, they started putting inflation on the policies of 10, 12, 15%, in turn increased insurance premium. So there was your first kind of like
adjustment,
increase, and they didn't know exactly what route to go.
Yep.
And then, as you mentioned, the storms, the hail, everything, in this area, whatever, that was, I guess, kind of the final straw. Is what happened is everybody for a long time around here, we didn't have a ton of those storms, so we didn't have a lot of claims on that. Well, after the claims that happened, like 21, 22, 23 were terrible.
Yeah.
And it was for, a lot of the companies and carriers that we work with. What was happening is a lot of people were sitting, in their rocking chair praying that their 35-year-old roof was going to be taken by the hailstorms, because insurance companies didn't have, certain implementations on, okay, we're not going to pay replacement costs on a 35-year-old roof. Now it's a different case, but what was happening is, like I said, people were praying for storms to come.
I'm not going to lie. I was one of those people, Jake. All right, our roof's 25 years old, and
yep.
This is going to be a big bill someday. So if this hail could just go right through this neighborhood. Right. Well, not to mention too, the amount of, we didn't, by the way, nothing happened. I still have my same old roof, and I didn't, just for all the people out there. But what I wanted to say is, and what you've got me thinking about is being in this industry, right? We had so many people that were like, there are roof companies just knocking on our door.
Oh, yeah.
All the time, right?
Yep.
Saying that our roof is bad, even if it's not, because the roof companies don't get paid if they don't put any roofs on. And what an easy way to do it, by taking advantage of the insurance companies in a spot where they knew that storm went right through there.
Yep.
And of course, people are like, oh, I can get a new roof. This is great.
Yep.
And so then what we had is, not only were we working with the insurance price, but then now people all of a sudden couldn't close on their house because now their roof had to be replaced.
Yep.
Because there was already in the contract. Yep. And they were just waiting. And now these sellers were mad because they couldn't sell their house until the roof was. So it was a big cycle for us too.
Sure.
And, that just shows you how something like that can really, it's a domino effect.
Yep.
And it goes down and down. And then people are like, well, what do you mean?
Yep.
So yeah, you had a lot of predatory roof companies out there. Yep. Not all of them, but you had some out there that were like, all right, this is our claim to fame. This is where we're going to get rich. And then what happens? Then insurance goes up.
Yeah.
And then everybody's mad because insurance went up.
Correct.
So
yeah, we call that neighboritis.
Yeah.
So,
I like that, neighboritis.
You're sitting there and, Bob sees that Joe got a roof and Joe sees that Tim got a roof. So I better call my insurance company and get my adjuster out there. And, we call that neighboritis. There's a lot of those, fly-by-night storm chaser guys that come around your neighborhood knocking. That's the one thing that I would tell anybody is do not you can entertain it, but do not sign a contract, because a lot of times what they do when they come to your door is they say, okay, your roof has damage. Your insurance company will pay for it, but we need to get up there now and take care of it. Or
yes.
Do not do that.
Don't do that. Don't learn the hard way. Listen to Jake.
Your insurance adjuster company needs to see that roof beforehand.
Okay. Good to know.
And I would say talk to your agent or call your company, immediately if you think there is, because ultimately at the end of the day, your insurance adjuster is going to make the decision of if there's coverage or not. I mean, generally they know, the same as the contractors, but the contractors don't cut the check. The insurance company does.
Thank you.
So before you just, get all excited and whatever, make sure that you call your insurance agent or the company, whatever, and get an adjuster up on that roof, because, we've had a lot of discouraged people because, this guy that came to your house from Texas that you've never seen before said
Right.
you needed a new roof pronto, and your company comes out, hops up there, and it's really not as bad as what they said it was.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
but yeah, so back to the whole roofs. People with 35-year-old roofs were getting brand new ones.
Yep.
And that caused a lot of stir in the industry. Obviously, the roofs were very expensive, and post-COVID, a $10,000 roof was now $17,000.
Yes.
So they were paying out replacement costs on, roofs that never should have been. Your car depreciates the minute you drive it off your lot, but we're going to pay $20,000 on a roof that's been beat up by sun, trees, wind, hail for 25 years.
I mean, as much as it is, like, we got to say common sense here, right?
Right.
You wouldn't turn in a 20-year-old car and say, oh, it's totaled, buy me a brand new one.
Right.
A 20-year-old car is still not worth $50,000 when it was brand new.
Correct. But
they
the
don't
roofer,
think that way on the roof side of things, do they?
But the roofer told me it's a 30 or 50-year guaranteed shingle, and that guarantee doesn't mean anything.
Okay, that's good to know.
I mean, the guarantee means something to them and to their,
Right.
to what the shingle is. But okay, yeah, go put the shingle in a plastic box and put it in your basement. It'll last 50 years. I guarantee it.
Yeah.
But you put that out in Wisconsin with all of our weather, or if you live in the woods or the sun or whatever, I mean, sure, it'll last 50 years, but I mean, if you get golf ball to baseball size hail, don't tell me it's not going to be damaged, right? I mean, so, we hear that all the time.
Yeah.
I understand it. Roofs are expensive. I'm in the predicament where my roof is, 24 years old right now as well. I still think it's in good shape. And what the insurance companies did is, following all that incident, was increased deductibles for wind and hail storms, wind and hail perils. Everybody used to have a $500 or $1,000 deductible. There's very, very few and far between. Do I ever see 500 or 1,000?
Okay, so if you have one, hold on to it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Got it.
A lot of them now are 2,500.
Yeah.
And some of them are going to percentages, which, they say 1 or 2% deductible for wind and hail. And that 1% or 2% is percent of your home value.
Got it.
So if your home's insured for $500,000, that means your wind hail deductible at 1% is $5,000.
Got it.
A lot of people don't see it.
That's good to know.
A lot of people don't see it. They don't realize it. A lot of times for first time home buyer, whatever, nobody cares about the insurance. I just need it. Right.
Yep.
And then they sign up, and then they have a claim, and wait a minute, I got a $5,000 deductible.
Gonna make you think twice about taking that.
So we try to stay away from that. We try to work with flat deductibles. So it's $2,500, $5,000, whatever. I mean, you need to know your deductible.
Yeah.
But what the insurance companies are doing is obviously making the people a little bit more aware of the situation. And a lot of them
important.
Yes. A lot of them have put roof restrictions on. So now you can't go to a certain company if your roof is over 10 years or over 15 years. They will not allow you whatsoever to be their new client. So,
I was just going to ask you, like, what do you mean in that? But so I have a 15-year-old roof, but ABC Insurance Company may not insure me.
Correct.
Okay.
And that's cut and dry. I mean, there's no like, oh, well, it's a 30-year shingle. Again, back to that. We hear that. And, it's a 17-year-old roof, but it's a 30-year guaranteed, shingle, whatever. Unfortunately, the insurance companies, they don't care.
Yeah.
So yes, there's a lot of companies out there like that now, but there's still companies that'll take anyone. I mean, we got to be able to insure people, and we have those companies that'll do it. The insurance companies are just trying to make people more aware of what's happening, what's out there. And the insurance companies obviously paid out a ton of money these last couple of years. They jacked up your rates.
Yep.
And now they're realizing, okay, we need to make people a little bit more responsible for their stuff, So.
Well, I would have to assume it came to a point where the insurance fraud was so crazy high that now we're all paying for it.
Yep.
Really is a lot of what's going on.
Yeah.
Is the, get rich quick off the insurance money.
Yep.
Now, where do you see, I think this might be a lighter note, where do you see Wisconsin or the Midwest in relation to the rest of the country as far as insurance premiums going up? I've heard that they're not going up nearly as much, but I would love your take because that's just like I'm here. It's hearsay for me.
Sure. I would say that, we just had some meetings and stuff last week with a lot of different companies and carriers. And I would say that, knock on wood, 2024 was a year we needed. We didn't have nearly the severity of storms and stuff. Now Iowa, they still had some derechos and tornadoes.
Yes.
Wisconsin, we had a tornado in February in southern Wisconsin, whatever that was, down by
That's
Milwaukee.
right. I totally forgot about that.
But knock on wood, it was a better year.
Yes.
Some companies were profitable, some were not, but it wasn't to the extent where they were closing their doors. Like we had one recently here in Wisconsin close their doors on personal lines.
Oh, really?
Secure Insurance.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
So they just, I don't know all the rhyme or reason behind it. Obviously I'm not there, but they said we're no longer going to be writing residential stuff. And
in the other side of it, like that was a lot of people loved 2% interest rates, but mortgage companies were failing at those low rates.
Sure.
It's not sustainable. Sure. And you had a lot of mortgage companies leave the industry now.
Yep.
And you had a lot of loan officers leave the industry now. So it's very similar, right? It just becomes, no company can stand to be in business if they're losing money year over year over year over year. Maybe they had one back year, but they can't have a bunch of bad years back to back.
Correct. Now, one thing that Wisconsinites won't want to hear is that Wisconsin folk do not realize how cheap our insurance actually is.
They don't, and I will back Jake on this all day long because I'm licensed throughout the country, and the insurance premiums we have here are incredibly low to what you see around.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I get a lot of people that move from out of state, whether it's the Dakotas, Nebraska, Ohio, Florida, people coming back, or, Texas, Oklahoma, and, we quote them, and, I salivate when the phone rings and it's somebody calling me from South Dakota moving to Green Bay because when I quote their insurance, they're like, oh my gosh, that's it? Like,
they're not beating you up over it.
That's it. Yeah,
Totally. So that's how I feel about closing costs, because that's another thing Wisconsinites don't know is Wisconsin is notoriously one of the lowest closing cost states in the country.
Okay.
And so when I'm telling people what our closing costs are, they're like, you had to be kidding me. This is ridiculous. Yet if I do a loan for somebody in Florida or Minneapolis or even Nevada for that matter, the no income tax states, they're getting that money somewhere.
Sure.
And they're making it up in their title fees and their closing costs, their transfer fees.
Yep.
So all of a sudden, our $2,500 to $3,000 total all-in closing costs, you go to one of those states, they're probably $5,000 to $10,000.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, let's talk,
Right.
But you're
100%.
very right. So we've been very, very fortunate that the overall costs for us in Wisconsin and so many factors of big purchases are relatively low when you're, relatively speaking.
Right. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say insurance costs are going to go down because let's be honest, nothing's going down.
Once stuff goes up, it never comes back down.
Right. Vehicles are getting more expensive. Yep. You get in a car accident and, a bumper's not a bumper anymore.
No.
You got all your fancy sensors, computer stuff, all that in your car now, just like your home. I mean, there's so many more fancy upgraded things, above
all the smart grade. Things, you just said, all the sensors, all the beepers, all the this, that, and the next thing, all the computer little chips everywhere.
Yep. One thing I would say about the mortgage side of things and, just with roofs is the problem that we're seeing now is, and you kind of touched on it, is, sellers having to replace a roof before, somebody can buy it or, whatever along those lines. What we're seeing is now, because of these higher deductibles, somebody will have a roof claim, right? Say it's going to be $18,000.
Yep.
They have a $5,000 deductible. Insurance, whether they give you the full replacement or not, you still have your $5,000 deductible on.
Yeah.
And what's happening is the insurance company will pay you their upfront amount, or their, usually they pay you an actual cash value amount up front.
Okay.
You get the work done.
Yep.
You submit the final bill or receipt, and then they finish off and pay the replacement cost. So you're at, zero at 100%.
Got it.
What's happening is we're seeing people not have that $5,000 for the deductible. Insurance companies.
I was just going to say.
And then they get the check from the insurance company. They still don't apply it to their roof. They go to Disney. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden they have a roof that they think, oh, well, the roof's fine. Well, an insurance company won't insure somebody that had a claim on their roof.
Yeah, so now you can't sell it.
They can't sell it. They can't even insure it.
Well, you can't. And in the head, you're so right on this. And I've seen it happen over and over again. And then what happens is then they're mad because that buyer that wants, because you're like, well, I'll just pass it on to the next guy. They can deal with it. I've got the insurance money.
Yep.
And then the next guy wants to buy your house, and then he can't get insurance, or she can't get insurance.
Yep.
And now all of a sudden you're like, well, shit. Well, what do I do here?
Yeah,
and it's like, well, how about that $5,000 deductible you got to put towards that? You know, they took the money and ran, and now you still have a house that needs a roof.
Sure.
And now, do you just take a lesser? Because then they don't want to cut their proceeds on that house by $20,000.
Correct.
But that's what it's going to cost the buyer. So you got yourself a conundrum there.
I've said, and we've talked about this a little bit as an agency is, we don't know if like banks, mortgages through the escrow are going to have to start setting some money aside for people's deductibles because, it's just another little savings that you're going to have if something happens.
Here's one thing that started happening, and I think this is going to happen more and more and more, and probably to the point where it goes to all the time, is if there's an insurance claim on anything to do with the house, the insurance company is now writing the check to the lender and the client, and the client has to mail that check to the lender for the lender to sign off on it, which then tells the insurance company this is getting fixed. Because now the lender knows there's an issue with that roof.
Sure.
And we want to protect our collateral.
Sure.
And that didn't happen years ago. And that happens more and more now. And people are mad about it because they don't want to go to their lender. They want to take it to the bank and put it in the bank, and they don't want their lender to have anything to do with that.
Correct.
So I think that's one of the safeguards, which is actually, as much of a pain as it is going to be a safeguard for the rest of our financial futures when it comes to insurance and housing.
Sure. Absolutely.
So interesting. Well, so much good information. I feel like I could sit here with you for another 3 hours and go into all kinds of rabbit holes. So don't be surprised if you see Jake back again on the Always On Point podcast, if you'll be so kind to join us at a later date. But there's always stuff, and insurance is so important. The other thing I want to stress is when you're buying a house, get your insurance quote the minute you get an accepted offer, because you don't know what that will be, and that could significantly change your payment. So there's no more waiting till, the week before, get the insurance.
Right.
Get the insurance quote right away. The other thing, if I can stress at all, don't just go online and get your own quote, because you're probably not nearly insured enough. And they're like, but my quote is so cheap, because it's probably missing some pump. It's probably missing God knows what.
Correct.
And talk to an agent to make sure you are insured correctly, because I would never want to see somebody lose everything because they just went online and got a super cheap quote that they didn't know. I'm not an insurance agent, nor do I play one on TV. And I'm certainly not going to go online and act like I know what I need for insurance, because I don't. So it's so important to work with a professional. Thank you, Jake, so much for coming in today and educating us. If you all want any more information, Jake has offered for you to pick his brain.
Go ahead.
But no, in all reality, he's a super great guy, works for a really great insurance agency whom I've done insurance business with myself and know and trust them. And definitely just make sure you're working with a professional that can answer the questions that you need, because insurance is no more like just a thought of the past. It's very present, and it is very much a part of our lives, and you want to make sure that you have it right. You don't need to be overinsured, but you need to ensure that you have enough insurance.
Correct.
So awesome. Well, Jake, again, thank you so much. For those of you who are listening today, we appreciate it so much. Don't forget to, the only entry to the podcast is to like, subscribe, download, share with a friend if you can. We want to be seen and heard, definitely. And we'll keep bringing you all the best content we know how to make sure that you are being educated on all the things important to you. So again, thank you so much for staying with us today on the Always On Point podcast with Kristen Ambrose.